The city woke up every morning before the sun. Lights turned on in tall buildings, cars filled the roads, and people rushed as if time was chasing them. In the middle of this busy city stood a huge glass house on a quiet hill. From the outside, it looked perfect. Clean walls, strong gates, green gardens, and security everywhere. People passing by often slowed down just to look at it. They whispered about the man who lived inside. A billionaire. Powerful. Successful. Someone who had everything inside that house. Lived a man who worked harder than anyone else. His days started early and ended late. Meetings, phone calls, contracts, and numbers filled his life. Money came easily to him, but peace did not. He believed success meant staying strong, not showing feelings. To the world, he was confident and calm. But when he walked through the long halls of his house, his footsteps often echoed with silence. His wife lived in the same house, yet they felt like strangers. She wore expensive clothes, attended high-class parties, and smiled for photos. People admired her beauty and style. Many thought she was lucky. But behind her smiles, there was impatience. She complained often. The house felt too quiet for her. She wanted attention, excitement, and praise. Their conversations were short and cold, usually about events or appearances. Love was something they no longer spoke about. They shared a large bedroom, but slept far apart. Nights were quiet, broken only by the sound of phones lighting up in the dark. Sometimes the man noticed her turning her screen away when he came close. He thought nothing of it. He trusted her. Trust, to him, was simple. Once given, it was not questioned. Every morning, the house came alive with workers. Gardeners, drivers, cooks, and cleaners moved silently, trained to be unseen. Among them was a poor maid. She arrived before sunrise and left after sunset. Her clothes were simple. Her hands were rough from work. She spoke softly and kept her eyes down. Most people ignored her presence. Her life was not easy. She lived in a small room far from the rich areas of the city. Her mother was sick and needed medicine every month. Some days the maid skipped meals so her mother could eat. She never complained. She believed hard work and honesty were her only strengths. In the big house, she cleaned rooms, washed floors, and dusted furniture that cost more than her lifetime earnings. She noticed things others didn't. Silence, tension, cold looks. She saw how the man came home tired, loosening his tie with heavy steps. She saw how the wife often spoke sharply to the staff, her mood changing without reason. The maid avoided trouble. She did her work carefully and quickly. She respected the house, even though it was not hers. Sometimes, when no one was around, she looked at family photos on the walls. The man and his wife smiling at events, standing close for cameras. The maid wondered if they were truly happy or just acting. One evening, the man returned home earlier than usual. The meeting had been canceled. He expected to surprise his wife. Instead, he found the house unusually quiet. The staff said she had gone out. He nodded and went to his study. As he worked, he felt a strange unease, but he ignored it. This house was protected by cameras everywhere. Hallways, entrances, corners. He had installed them years ago after a security scare. He rarely checked them himself. That was someone else's job. Late that night, he walked through the house alone. He passed the living room, the dining area, and the long hallway that led to the private rooms. In one corner, he noticed a small red light blinking on a camera. For a moment, he stopped. Something about it made him pause. But he shook his head and continued walking. In the kitchen, the maid was still working. She was cleaning quietly, even though her shift had ended. The cook had left early, and the maid stayed behind to finish the work. She noticed the man standing there and quickly bowed her head. He asked why she was still there. She explained softly that she wanted to finish everything properly. He nodded, thanked her briefly, and walked away. That small moment meant little to him then, but it stayed in her heart. Not many people thanked her. Days passed and life continued as usual. The man focused on business. The wife spent more time outside the house. She came home late, often distracted. When he asked simple questions, she gave short answers. He assumed stress, maybe boredom. He believed money could solve most problems. He was wrong. One afternoon, the maid was cleaning the guest room near the back entrance. She heard voices outside. She did not mean to listen, but the voices were loud. One sounded familiar. It was the wife. The other was a man she did not recognize. Their words were unclear, but their tone made the maid uncomfortable. She quietly stepped away, her heart beating fast. She did not tell anyone. She feared losing her job. Poor people could not afford mistakes. That same evening, the man's driver mentioned something strange. He had seen someone visiting the house often when the man was away. The driver hesitated, unsure if he should speak. The man brushed it off. Trust again blinded him, but doubt had entered his mind. That night, he sat alone in his study. The city lights shone through the window. For the first time in years, he felt restless. He opened his laptop and accessed the security system, told himself it was just curiosity. He clicked through dates and times, fast-forwarding footage. Nothing seemed unusual at first. Staff moving, cars coming and going. Then he paused. Saw his wife entering through a side door during the afternoon hours. That was normal. But minutes later, another man followed. His heart tightened. He watched silently, his hand frozen on the mouse. The camera showed them talking closely, laughing. The footage was clear. Too clear. He did not move. He did not breathe. His world began to crack, slowly and painfully. He closed the laptop without finishing the video. Could not face the rest. Not yet. In another part of the house, the maid finished her work and prepared to leave. She stood for a moment near the door, feeling a strange sadness she could not explain. She had seen many rich people, but she had learned that money did not protect hearts. As she walked into the night, the big house stood silent behind her, holding secrets that were about to change many lives forever. The next morning felt heavier than usual. The house looked the same, but something inside it had shifted. The man woke up early, even though he barely slept. His mind replayed the short clip he had seen again and again. He told himself there had to be an explanation. Maybe he was overthinking. Maybe it was nothing. Yet his chest felt tight and his hands were cold. He got ready for work slowly. When he came downstairs, his wife was already there, sitting at the dining table. She looked calm, scrolling through her phone, sipping coffee like any normal morning. She greeted him with a soft smile. Felt rehearsed. He studied her face carefully. Every expression felt unfamiliar. He wondered how long this distance had been growing between them. He wondered how he had missed it. They exchanged a few words about the day ahead. Nothing deep. Nothing real. The silence between their sentences said more than their voices. As he left the house, he glanced at the cameras near the entrance. For the first time, they didn't feel like security. They felt like witnesses at work. He tried to focus. Meetings came and went. People talked numbers, profits, future plans. He nodded and signed papers, but his mind was far away. During a break, he locked himself in his office and opened the security footage again. This time, he forced himself to watch. He replayed the scene from the beginning, the side door opening, his wife stepping inside, dressed carefully, checking her phone. Minutes later, the other man arrived. They spoke closely, their body language relaxed and familiar. They walked down the hallway together, out of camera view. The footage continued. Later, they reappeared, laughing quietly. She fixed her hair. He touched her arm. It was clear, painfully clear. The man leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen long after the video ended. There was no anger yet, just disbelief. Years of trust collapsed in silence. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. For the first time, he felt truly alone. That evening, he returned home earlier again. He wanted answers. His wife was in the living room talking on the phone. She ended the call quickly when she saw him. Her smile faded for a second before returning. He asked where she had been that afternoon. She answered without hesitation, giving a simple excuse. Too simple. He nodded, pretending to believe her. Inside, something broke. Later that night, he sat in the dark, watching the house through the camera system. He did not know why he kept looking. Maybe he hoped to be proven wrong. Maybe he was preparing himself for the truth. Meanwhile, the maid moved quietly through the house. She felt the tension but did not understand it fully. She cleaned, organized, and avoided eye contact. Yet she noticed the man's tired eyes and the wife's sharp tone. That night, while emptying trash near the back hallway, the maid noticed something strange. A door that was usually locked stood slightly open. Voices echoed faintly from inside. She froze. She recognized one of them. It was the wife. Fear ran through her. She stepped back slowly, careful not to make a sound. Her heart pounded as she returned to her duties. She wanted to forget what she had heard. The next few days passed like a quiet storm. The man and his wife spoke less and less. He watched. He waited. She became more careless, confident that her secrets were safe. One afternoon, a delivery arrived at the house. The maid received it. It was an expensive item, not meant for the house. The name on it was unfamiliar. She hesitated, unsure what to do. When the wife saw it, her face changed. She took it quickly and warned the maid not to touch such things again. The maid apologized. She did not understand, but she felt uneasy. That evening, the man reviewed footage again. This time, something else caught his eye. The maid, he saw her staying late finishing work without being told. He saw her helping the gardener, carrying heavy bags, despite her small frame. He saw her quietly giving food to a stray cat near the gate. It surprised him. In a house full of comfort, kindness came from the poorest person. Days later, another clip appeared. His wife and the same man again. Different day. Same place. No doubt left. The truth hit harder this time. He felt anger rise, but also shame. How had he built an empire, yet failed to see what was happening in his own home? That night, he did not sleep in the bedroom. He stayed in his study, staring at the city lights. His life suddenly felt empty. In the early morning hours, he heard movement. He checked the cameras. The maid was in the kitchen, preparing to leave. She looked tired, but she moved carefully, making sure everything was clean. He went downstairs quietly. She did not see him at first. When she turned around, she looked shocked. He asked her how long she had worked there. She answered politely. He asked about her family. She hesitated, then spoke about her sick mother. Her voice did not seek pity. It simply told the truth. He listened. That conversation was short, but it stayed with him all day. It was honest. Something he had not felt in a long time. Later that evening, his wife confronted him. She accused him of being distant, of caring more about work than her. He listened silently. When she finished, he asked one question. He asked if she was telling him the truth. She looked away. That was enough. He did not argue. He did not shout. He simply walked away, knowing that the life he thought he had was already gone, in another part of the house. The maid packed her bag to leave for the night. She felt a strange heaviness, as if something bad was about to happen. She whispered a quiet prayer before stepping outside. The cameras continued to record, and the truth was no. Longer hidden, the house felt colder after that night. Not because of the weather, but because something important had broken. The man moved through his days like a shadow of himself. He spoke only when necessary. He avoided looking at his wife, and she avoided him in return. Their home, once filled with quiet comfort, now held heavy silence. He did not confront her right away. Part of him wanted to hear the truth from her mouth. Another part already knew it would hurt more. He focused on work, but even his company felt distant. Numbers no longer excited him. Success no longer mattered the way it used to. At night, he slept in his study. The bedroom reminded him of promises that no longer existed. Sometimes he sat alone, staring at the walls, wondering when love had turned into habit, and habit into emptiness. His wife noticed the change. She tried to act normal, but impatience showed in her voice. She complained about small things. She stayed out later. She spent more time on her phone. The distance between them grew wider each day. The staff sensed it too. Conversations became quieter. Footsteps lighter. Everyone felt like they were walking on thin glass. The maid continued her work as usual. She stayed away from trouble, kept her head down, and focused on her duties. But she felt uneasy. She had seen too much without wanting to. Her heart told her that truth, once uncovered, often brought pain to everyone involved. One afternoon, the man called for a meeting at home with his legal advisor. He did not explain why. The papers they discussed were serious. He signed slowly, carefully reading each page. His face showed no emotion, but his hands trembled slightly. That evening, he asked his wife to sit with him in the living room. The house was quiet. The lights were low. The cameras watched silently. He did not raise his voice. He did not accuse. He simply told her that he knew. At first she laughed. She said he was imagining things. She blamed stress. She blamed loneliness. She blamed him. Then he showed her the footage. Her face changed instantly. Color drained from her cheeks. She looked away, unable to watch for long. The silence between them stretched painfully. She tried to explain. She said she felt ignored. She said money was not enough. She said she had felt alone for years. He listened quietly. When she finished, he asked one question. He asked why she did not leave instead of lying. She had no answer that night. The truth settled heavily between them. There was no shouting, no drama, just a quiet understanding that their marriage was over. In the days that followed, the decision became clear. Separation came quickly. The news did not reach the public yet. But the house already felt empty. The maid watched from a distance as boxes were packed. Clothes disappeared from closets. Laughter vanished from hallways. She felt sad, though it was not her place to feel anything. One morning, the wife left the house with her bags. She did not look back. The gates closed behind her. Ending a chapter of that house forever, the man stood alone in the living room long after she left. The echo of the closing gates stayed in his ears. He felt loss, but also relief. Truth, though painful, had freed him. That evening, he sat at the dining table alone. The food remained untouched. The maid noticed and hesitated before speaking. She asked softly if he wanted tea. He nodded. She brought the cup carefully and placed it in front of him. Their eyes met briefly. In that moment, there was no billionaire and no maid. Just two tired human beings. He thanked her. Days passed. The house became quieter. Fewer rooms were used. The man stopped attending social events. He stopped caring about appearances. He spent time thinking about his life, his choices, and his mistakes. He began to notice the maid more. Not in a strange way, but in a human way. He noticed how she always finished her work, even when no one was watching. How she spoke kindly to others. How she never complained. One evening, he found her sitting in the small staff area, rubbing her hands. They were red and cracked from cleaning. He asked if she was okay. She quickly stood up and said she was fine. She did not expect concern from someone like him. He told her to sit. He offered her water. She hesitated, then accepted. They spoke for a few minutes. Simple words. Nothing deep. Yet the conversation felt more honest than most he had in years. She spoke about her mother's health, about hospital visits, about fear of losing the only family she had. He listened without interrupting that night. He lay awake, thinking about how someone with so little could still have such strength. Meanwhile, his wife's absence slowly became real. He missed the idea of companionship, not the lies. He missed having someone in the house, but he did not miss the pain. The public soon learned about the separation. Rumors spread. Some blamed him. Some blamed her. He ignored them all. One afternoon, while reviewing camera footage out of habit, he saw something unexpected. The maid had slipped and fallen while carrying supplies. She quickly stood up, checking to see if anyone had noticed. She continued working despite clear pain. Something about that moment stayed with him. Later that day, he asked the house manager to reduce her workload slightly. No explanation was given. The maid noticed the change. She did not understand it, but she felt grateful. As weeks passed, the man felt himself changing. He became quieter, calmer. The anger faded, replaced by reflection. He realized how little he had truly known the people around him. One evening during a power cut, the house went dark. Staff gathered in one area. Candles were lit. The atmosphere felt strangely peaceful. The maid sat nearby, holding a candle. The soft light showed her tired face, but also her calm strength. The man sat across from her. For the first time in a long while, he felt something warm. Not love, not desire, just hope. He realized that life had taken something from him, but it had also shown him something important. Truth does not always destroy. Sometimes, it clears the way for something real to begin. The days after the separation felt strangely quiet. The house, once filled with distant tension and whispered complaints, now held a softer rhythm. The man found himself wandering through rooms he had ignored for years, noticing small things that spoke of care and thoughtfulness, fresh flowers in the hallway, books stacked neatly, lights turned on in patterns that made the rooms feel welcoming. Yet what caught his attention the most was not these details, but the quiet strength of the maid who moved through the house with purpose and patience. He began to see her in a new light, not as someone who worked for him, but as someone who had endured life's hardships without losing her honesty and kindness. She never complained, never demanded attention, and always carried herself with dignity. There was something about her presence that calmed the house, that made it feel human again. He realized that amidst the lies, betrayal, and wealth, she represented something rare: integrity. One afternoon he called the maid into the study. She hesitated for a moment, her hands slightly trembling, unsure what he wanted. She had always been careful, knowing that one wrong step could cost her a job she relied on to care for her mother. When she entered, he asked her to sit. He did not speak of wealth or power. He asked simple questions about her life, her family, her challenges, her dreams. Her answers were straightforward, honest, and humble. She spoke of her mother's illness, the small apartment they lived in, the hospital visits she could barely afford, and her constant worry about making ends meet. There was no self-pity, only truth. The man listened intently. For the first time in a long while, he felt no need to control, no need to impress. He just listened, absorbing the reality of someone else's life. He realized how disconnected he had been from the struggles of ordinary people. His fortune had built walls around him, both physical and emotional. But here, in this simple conversation, he felt a connection that money could never buy. Days passed, and the bond between them grew quietly. He began to notice small things she did, folding clothes meticulously, preparing meals with care, making sure every detail in the house was perfect. It was never forced. It was never for recognition. It was genuine. And slowly, he found himself respecting her, not because she worked for him, but because of who she was. He started asking her advice on small things around the house, not because he needed help, but because he valued her perspective. She offered suggestions respectfully, never overstepping, yet her opinions held weight in his eyes. The walls between master and maid began to fade. What remained was human understanding, mutual respect, and trust. One evening, as they sat in the living room after the house had grown quiet, he asked her about her dreams. She hesitated at first, unsure if it was appropriate to speak of ambitions when her world was so small and burdened with responsibility. But she shared a simple hope: to secure a better life for her mother, to live honestly, and to one day see her mother well again. Nothing grand, nothing distant, just hope for health, security, and dignity. He was moved. Here was someone who had never asked for wealth, power, or fame. She asked only for life's basic kindness and fairness. And yet, she carried herself with a quiet dignity that challenged him to rethink everything he had valued in life. Their conversations continued, always respectful, always measured. He began to involve her more in decisions around the house, not orders, but discussions. She never acted superior, never sought attention. Yet, her words carried a weight that surprised him. He realized that wisdom does not come from wealth, but from experience and honesty. Outside the house, life in the city went on. The media had caught wind of his separation. Gossip spread about the billionaire who had lost his wife, but he no longer cared about what others thought. What mattered now was truth, honesty, and the people who lived genuinely, not for appearances. One morning, he noticed the maid struggling with heavy boxes she had to carry to the storage room. Without thinking, he stepped forward and helped her. She was startled. No one had ever offered to help her before, not out of obligation or charity, but out of genuine concern. Together they carried the boxes, their hands brushing occasionally. Neither spoke much, but in the silence, understanding grew. Later that week, he found her in the garden, tending to the plants during her free time. She smiled when he approached, but did not stop her work. He watched for a while, appreciating the care she gave to something so small, yet alive. He realized that life's beauty often comes from attention to small details, and that happiness is often hidden in simple acts. Their growing bond was noticed by the other staff members. They whispered, speculated, and watched. But the man did not care. He had learned that human connection could not be dictated by status or wealth. He had learned to value honesty, integrity, and kindness above all else. One rainy afternoon, as they sat near the window watching droplets race down the glass, the man spoke quietly. He admitted that his life had been empty despite all his riches. He confessed to feeling alone, betrayed, and lost. The maid listened, offering only empathy, never judgment. She shared small words of comfort, not dramatic declarations, the kind that feel real. In that moment, he realized that wealth had never been the source of peace. It had only been a shield from the real world, a way to avoid seeing what truly matters. But here, in this quiet room, with someone who carried honesty in her heart, he felt the stirrings of hope. Hope was something he had long forgotten. Hope for truth, for trust, and for a life that mattered. The maid did not promise him anything. She did not offer him love or fortune. She simply existed with honesty and care, showing that kindness could exist without expectation, and integrity could thrive without recognition. In the following weeks, their bond strengthened through shared routines. He noticed how she remembered small details, the timing of meals, the placement of objects, the habits of other staff. She did not use her knowledge to manipulate or control. She used it to make life smoother for everyone. The more he observed, the more he admired her. He also began to reflect on the life he had lost with his wife. The betrayal had hurt deeply, but it had cleared space in his heart for something real. He realized that love built on appearances, lies, or convenience could never satisfy. But respect, understanding, shared humanity could form a connection stronger than wealth or status. One evening, he invited her to sit beside him in the study after a long day. He asked her about her childhood, her experiences, and the lessons she had learned. She spoke with humility and clarity, revealing resilience shaped by hardship, and a heart that remained unbroken despite struggle. He listened quietly, learning more than he ever had in boardrooms or social gatherings. The night deepened, and the city outside fell silent. Inside the house, a quiet warmth filled the space. It was not the grandeur of wealth, nor the comfort of luxury, but the gentle understanding between two people who had learned to see each other truly. He realized that life had given him a second chance, not through fortune, but through witnessing the strength, honesty, and humanity of someone he had once overlooked. The maid, who had been unseen and unheard, became a symbol of what truly mattered: integrity, care, and hope. In those quiet moments, he understood that hope could arise in the most unexpected places. Loss had opened the door, and honesty had entered quietly, carrying the promise of a life rebuilt on trust and human connection. And though nothing had been promised, everything felt possible. Time moved slowly in the big house, but it moved with purpose. The man had begun to see the value in small moments, in simple conversations, and in honesty that did not demand anything in return. He continued his work, but his perspective had changed. Decisions were no longer just about profit or appearances. They were about meaning, fairness, and the kind of life he wanted to live. The maid remained a quiet presence in the house, working diligently but without seeking recognition. Her strength came from a life shaped by challenges, and her kindness came from a heart that understood hardship. She did not expect the man to notice, yet he could not help but see her. Every day she reminded him that life was not about wealth or status, but about truth, integrity, and human connection. One morning, he invited her to walk in the garden with him. It was unusual for him to leave the walls of the house, but something inside him had shifted. The garden was quiet, birds chirping softly, the sun breaking through clouds. The maid moved carefully among the flowers, her hands brushing against petals as she spoke about what she loved: simple beauty, the life of small creatures, the rhythm of seasons. He listened quietly, absorbing her words. For the first time in years, he felt peace without obligation, without schedules, without status. They walked slowly, their steps in sync without words needing to be spoken. It was a human connection, unadorned and sincere. Days passed, and the bond between them deepened naturally. They did not speak of love or future promises. They simply shared space, respect, and understanding. He noticed how she thought before speaking, how her choices reflected care, and how she moved through the world with quiet dignity. She showed him the value of patience, of observing before judging, and of giving without expecting. One evening, a storm swept over the city. The wind howled and rain poured down heavily. The lights in the house flickered. Staff gathered to secure doors and windows. But the man noticed the maid stepping out briefly to check on the garden and the animals she cared about. Despite the storm, she moved with purpose, ensuring that everything was safe. When she returned, she was soaked, yet she smiled softly. Without thinking, he offered his coat. She hesitated but accepted. The gesture was small, yet it carried significance. Neither spoke of what it meant. Neither needed to. Actions were stronger than words. In the following weeks, he began to change his habits. He spent more time in the house, more time noticing life around him, and more time appreciating the simple truth of human effort. He started helping her with small tasks, not out of obligation, but out of genuine care. Together, they moved through daily routines with an unspoken understanding, silent companionship that was built on trust and honesty. He also reflected on the life he had lost with his wife. The betrayal had been painful, but it had cleared space in his heart for something genuine. He realized that love built on appearances could never last, but respect, care, and shared humanity formed a connection that was stronger than wealth or status. One afternoon, he invited her to sit in the study. The room was warm, filled with soft light from the window. He asked about her dreams, not in a distant or grand sense, but about small hopes: her mother's health, a safe home, a life lived with honesty. She spoke simply, without exaggeration or complaint. Her words held weight because they were true. He listened and realized that the life he wanted to build could not be measured by money or fame. It had to be measured by meaning, by the people he valued, and by the truth that connected them. He realized that the maid, through her honesty and strength, had taught him the most important lessons of all. Time passed, and the house settled into a new rhythm. There was no rush, no pretension, just life being lived honestly. The man learned to find joy in simple things: a well-prepared meal, a tidy room, a conversation that mattered. The maid continued her work, now with quiet recognition that her presence mattered, though she did not seek acknowledgement. One evening, the man found her sitting quietly in the garden, watching the sunset. He joined her, and together they observed the changing colors of the sky, the movement of the clouds, and the first stars appearing. No words were necessary. They shared the moment silently, feeling a connection deeper than words could express. He realized that wealth had never brought him true happiness. Power had never brought him peace. It was honesty, integrity, and human connection that created meaning. He had lost much, but in that loss, he had found something far greater. The maid, who had endured hardships all her life, had shown him what courage, patience, and truth could look like. She had given him hope without asking for anything in return. She had reminded him that life's most valuable lessons are often hidden in quiet acts of care and resilience. In the months that followed, the man began to live differently. He gave more attention to the people who worked around him, listened more, judged less, and understood that trust and respect were far more powerful than money or appearances. He built a life that, while still wealthy in material terms, was now rich in meaning and genuine connection. The bond between him and the maid grew naturally. It was not dramatic, not loud, but it was real. It was built on understanding, trust, and mutual respect. In her presence, he found peace. In his respect, she found dignity. Together, they created a quiet life where honesty, care, and human connection became the foundation. In the end, he realized that losing everything false had allowed him to find everything true. The house, once filled with betrayal and tension, now held warmth, integrity, and hope. And through it all, he learned the most important lesson of life, that true wealth is not measured in money, but in the honesty, strength, and humanity of those who touch our lives. He looked at the maid, and for the first time in years, he felt something profound. Not a fleeting emotion or a superficial connection, but hope, trust, and the quiet joy of finding truth in a world that often hides it. And he knew in that moment that life had changed forever for both of them. Even though the man had found hope and a sense of peace, life continued to teach him lessons he had never expected. The house, once only a place of routine, slowly transformed into a place of reflection, growth, and small miracles. Each day brought its own challenges, and the billionaire realized that life's wealth could not be measured in money alone. It was measured in choices, understanding, and the courage to embrace truth when it hurt most. One early morning, the maid arrived before sunrise, as she always did. The city was still quiet, and the first rays of light colored the sky with soft pink and gold. She began her work in silence, humming softly to herself as she cleaned, organized, and prepared the house for the day. She worked carefully, knowing that small details mattered more than anyone realized. The man watched her from a distance. He had started noticing her early morning routines, not out of surveillance or curiosity, but because he had grown to appreciate the discipline and sincerity with which she moved through her world. There was something pure in the way she did her work, something that reminded him of the beauty in ordinary life. He joined her in the kitchen, not to supervise, but simply to be near her presence. He offered to make tea for both of them. She accepted politely, smiling faintly. In the quiet of the morning, they sat together, sipping tea and watching the sun rise over the city. It was a simple moment, yet it felt monumental. Neither spoke of the past. Neither spoke of mistakes, but in the silence. A deep understanding passed between them as the day unfolded. The man found himself thinking about the people around him, the staff, the neighbors, and even strangers he met on his travels. For the first time, he realized that wealth could be used to protect, nurture, and uplift, not just to impress or control. He decided to make small changes, starting with those closest to him. He spoke kindly to the gardener, asked the cook for advice on new meals, and ensured that everyone in the house felt respected and valued. The maid noticed these changes. She saw a man who had been hurt, betrayed, and lonely, learning slowly to trust, care, and appreciate life in a new way. She respected the quiet transformation he was undergoing. She never offered praise or guidance, but her honest presence gave him strength. And he noticed it. One afternoon, a letter arrived at the house. It was from a distant relative of the maid's mother, someone she had not seen for years. They had heard about her struggles and offered help with medicine and a small loan to repair her apartment. The maid's eyes welled up with tears. For the first time in years, she felt a glimmer of relief, a sense that life could change for the better. The man noticed her tears and quietly placed a hand on her shoulder. She looked up, surprised, but did not speak. No words were needed. Compassion had been understood. The seasons changed slowly. Spring brought new flowers, summer brought warmth and sunlight, and autumn painted the city in shades of orange and gold. Through it all, the house remained a place of growth. the man continued to observe, learn, and connect. He discovered that even in the smallest acts of kindness, there was a profound impact. He began to help the maid with her tasks, not out of obligation, but because he had learned that giving without expectation was a form of freedom. One evening, as they walked in the garden, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of blooming flowers, the man spoke quietly. He confessed that he had never understood the value of honesty until he had seen it in someone who had nothing to gain from it. He admitted that the betrayal by his wife had hurt deeply, but it had also opened his eyes to the possibility of true connection. The maid listened attentively, not offering judgment, only presence and calm. In the following days, they began to spend more time together in quiet activities, reading books, tending the garden, and preparing meals. There was no rush, no forced intimacy, only a growing companionship built on mutual respect. The man noticed how her laughter, soft and unassuming, could brighten a room more than any decoration or luxury. He realized that human connection, honesty, and care were far more valuable than anything money could buy. One morning, the man received a call about a business matter. A major deal was going wrong, and urgency was required. Instead of panicking, he remained calm, remembering the lessons he had learned over the past months. He handled the issue with patience and clarity, guided not just by strategy, but by empathy and understanding. The deal was salvaged, and he felt a sense of satisfaction he had never felt in years of successful transactions. Success, he realized, was not just about profit. It was about how one navigated challenges with integrity. The maid continued her work faithfully, aware that her presence had become a source of inspiration. She moved through the house with quiet grace, tending to tasks, caring for the environment, and remaining a steady, honest force in the man's life. He often reflected on her resilience, her courage, and the quiet dignity she maintained despite hardship. She had shown him that strength is not loud, and courage does not always demand recognition. As winter approached, the man decided to renovate a small part of the house for the maid and her mother, creating a comfortable living space that allowed them to have privacy, warmth, and safety. He did not announce it, did not expect gratitude, but the gesture spoke volumes. When she discovered the renovation, her tears were quiet and her smile was filled with unspoken words. She had never been given anything out of expectation, and now she had a home that reflected care and respect. Through all these experiences, the man continued to reflect on the past. He forgave himself for the mistakes he had made, recognized the lessons in betrayal and loss, and embraced the value of genuine connection. He no longer sought approval or admiration from society. His life, though still materially wealthy, had become rich in meaning, integrity. In truth, in the evenings, they often sat by the window, watching the city lights, speaking softly, or simply enjoying silence. The maid had become more than a worker. She was a partner in shared humanity, a reminder that life's true value lies in honesty, care, and mutual respect. She had taught him patience, resilience, and the quiet power of kindness. As the months turned into a year, the man realized that he had found something rare. Not just companionship, but a sense of hope, a feeling that life, despite its challenges and betrayals, could still be meaningful. He had discovered that truth, courage, and integrity could create a life more fulfilling than any wealth could provide. The house, once a place of tension and secrets, had become a home filled with understanding, care, and quiet joy. The man and the maid, through shared experiences and honest connection, had built a life where actions spoke louder than words, where compassion outweighed ambition, and where hope was nurtured in the most unexpected places. In the end, he knew that losing his wife, facing betrayal, and enduring loneliness had been painful but necessary. Those experiences had cleared the path for something real and lasting. The maid, who had faced her own struggles with courage and grace, had shown him the meaning of strength, the beauty of honesty, and the power of human connection. And so, the billionaire, once blinded by wealth and appearances, found his life changed forever, not because of money or status, but because he had learned to value truth, integrity, and the quiet, unwavering strength of someone who had nothing to gain but everything to teach. The house was no longer just a building. It was a living testament to hope, trust, and the possibility of a life rebuilt on honesty and genuine care.